Okay. All right, welcome on this Midwest Big Data Hub Data Science Student Group webinar. These webinars are a place for data science student organizations to present their activities and how they are structured and to network. We are very glad to be conducting this program for the past couple of years now. On the last Wednesdays of the month, 5:30 to 6:30, although today is an unusual date, and because the month of November is so busy, we have moved the date a little bit earlier in the month. But we are so grateful to host tonight the Southside Civic organization from the University of Chicago. And we have three brilliant students talking about their activities tonight. We have Lilian Huang, who is a master's student in computational analysis and public policy at the University of Chicago, where she explores how computer science and data can be used to solve problems with real social impact. You can find her on Twitter at @nailhowling. Lauren Lee is a second-year MS CAP student interested in how technology can further public sector goals. She has worked in data science positions in the local and federal government, as well as for a number of nonprofits. She joined the board of Southside Civic as co-chair of community outreach last year in order to connect community organizations with university resources and promote the importance of scoping in data science projects. And Damini Sharma is a second-year grad student pursuing an MSc in computational analysis and public policy. She's worked at research institutions and nonprofits that are using data to improve outcomes in education and criminal justice. She joined the board of Southside Civic as marketing and operations co-chair last year because of her interest in using data and technology to help nonprofits meet their goals without skipping the important first step of scoping the problem. Thank you, all of you three, to be here tonight, and I will be stopping sharing my slides so you can upload yours and you can take it from there. Thank you.
Hi everyone, so we are from Southside Civic, and as mentioned, we are Lilian, Lauren, and Damini, and we're here to talk about the work we do with Southside Civic, and specifically our annual Civic Scopeathon event. So the mission of Southside Civic is we're an organization of University of Chicago graduate students based at the Harris School of Public Policy. And our goal is to build a community of Southsiders on the South Side of Chicago who are interested in open data and how it can be applied to solve civic problems faced by nonprofits and so on with specific social impact. And for this end, we bring together university students, community members living on the South Side of Chicago, and leaders of nonprofit organizations that serve the South Side of Chicago in order to learn about and delve into specific civic problems they have and to figure out how we can work together and leverage open data and technology to solve these problems. And so, So this is a pretty lofty goal, and specifically what we do is we have an annual event called the Civic Scopeathon, where we bring together all the people just mentioned in order to work together over the course of 2 days to frame specific problems faced by the nonprofits and develop and propose the solution by the end of the 2 days. And this originated 5 years ago from our program that we're all in, the Masters of Science in Computation Analysis and Public Policy. It was founded 5 years ago because our predecessors wanted to host a hackathon to apply the technical skills in computer science and data analysis to put these to use on real problems faced by nonprofit organizations. But after speaking with our faculty advisors, our predecessors decided that rather than jumping straight to building a technical solution or particular product, say a web application, as is common in a lot of hackathons, instead we would focus on we have an event that focuses on and highlights the very first step of developing any solution, i.e. scoping out the problem, deciding the particular goals and objectives you wanted to address, what sort of resources and data sources were available to the organizations to work on it, and to just outline an overall strategy or plan of attack to tackle this problem, rather than trying to scope out and build an entire technological product or solution in the course of a single day. And So what do we do in order to bring about this event? So we are 3 members of the executive board of Southside Civic. This year, the board consisted of 5 of us spread across 3 main roles. I am Director of Partner Outreach and Fundraising, and what this meant was that I engaged in a lot of the work to bring in keynote speakers, mentors, and judges, and so on for the day of the event. And I also reach out to partners to partner organizations in order to get financial sponsorship and publicity and to just raise awareness of the event among other campus and off-campus organizations. Damini is co-director of marketing and operations, which engaged in a lot of the event logistics, just in terms of, again, publicity and ensuring that the events on the day of the Scopeathon went smoothly, and a lot of the work with venue and logistics. Lauren is co-director of community outreach and worked with the nonprofit organizations that we brought in order to make sure to nail down a specific problem that they wanted to bring to the table and have addressed over the course of the event, and just work together to wrangle those problems and to make sure that the flow of communication was maintained with partner organizations. And so about how we put off this event, a lot of it was only possible with the help of our sponsors and partners. And so this question of what does a partnership typically look like for pulling off an event like this? So there are different avenues through which that we offer to partners. Specifically, they could offer us money or funding for covering event costs. And so this was organizations like Citybase, which is a technological firm that builds payment solutions, and for public systems, as well as Innovators in Social Policy, which is another on-campus organization that contributed funding to the event. And but we also received in-kind sponsorship, specifically from places such as the Polsky Center at the University of Chicago and our school, the Harris School of Public Policy, both of which offered us space for the event venue. And we also received other partnerships, help from other partners in terms of publicity and connecting us to potential event participants or speakers or judges. So that a lot of that came from as well from the Mansueto Institute for Urban Innovation, which was integral in connecting us to other people who might be interested in participating in the event in various capacities, and in tweeting out or just otherwise helping us further our communication strategy. And also a lot of our funding as well came from the Department of Computer Science. So those were just the main areas of partnership: financial sponsorship, in-kind sponsorship / venue sponsorship, and general publicity and helping us to further our network of people. And one of the biggest hurdles in setting up an event like this, especially for a student group, was in finding the funding, because there were a lot of people involved in this and a lot of mouths to feed, just a lot of cost to cover in general. And so the bulk of our funding, as mentioned, came from various academic divisions at our university. So we heavily leverage our programs funds, the MSCAP program, and the Department of Computer Science, and as aforementioned, the Mansueto Institute for Urban Innovation all contributed large amounts of funding for us. We also found that another thing that was useful to look into was general sources of on-campus funding or grants for student organizations. That there are a lot of pretty generous grant pools that we could apply to as a student organization, and where we couldn't. And we also drew upon collaborations with other student organizations that could help us to both work, strengthen our application and also contribute extra funds if they had them. Corporate sponsorship actually played a relatively minor role, and it can sometimes be a bit of a challenge in trying to coordinate corporate sponsors and to make sure because we are a nonprofit event and we work in tandem with a lot of nonprofit organizations, and we wanted to keep that. There's some concern about keeping that distinction pretty clear, but we also receive corporate sponsorship from, as mentioned, companies like Citybase. And one of the biggest costs in an event like this would be venue costs, but again, that was generously covered by our venue sponsors, the Polsky Center and the Harris School of Public Policy. So yes, apart from in-kind sponsorship, just the 3 main sources of funding for us were from the academic divisions, from money that is provided by the university in general, so student organizations, and to a lesser extent from our corporate sponsors. And with all that set up, I'll hand it over to Damini, who will talk about the day of the event itself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for having us. I'm Damini. So I'll go over what exactly the Scopeathon actually looks like, because that's the big thing that we're all working towards here. So what is a Scopeathon? I think sometimes it's helpful to think of it as what isn't a Scopeathon, and what it is not is a hackathon, as Lilian mentioned. We're not here to spend a day and a half to build some kind of application or analyze a bunch of data. It's really about that first step of, are we even there yet? Do we have the data we need? Do we have the resources we need? And asking and answering some of those questions. So we bring together community organizations from the south side of Chicago, along with graduate students. And we try to break down the problems into manageable parts. And at the end of the weekend, the goal is for every nonprofit to leave with a scoped out plan that they can take to their organizations and be like, okay, well, we spent some time thinking about this, got some fresh pair of eyes, and what's our next step? I do want to mention here, and as it says on the slide, the solutions may or may not be entirely tech oriented, or only parts of the solution may have a tech component. So a lot of times in all of our experiences, the organizations come in at a very different stage. Some have data and they don't know what to do with it, or they want some brainstorming about how to proceed next. A lot of times they might not have data, and it's not really even a data question anymore. It's more about, okay, we want to measure impact. What does impact mean? What are outcomes? What are metrics? And like kind of nailing down some of those specifics. And that is also a perfectly good deliverable if that's what the organization needs. So getting into the details of it a bit more, the participants are, it's open to anyone to participate. Most of them come from the University of Chicago. They're usually grad students, or some undergrads as well. Each team is about 8 to 10 people, and the breakdown is student participants, facilitators, and representatives from the community organizations. So we try to have 2 to 3 representatives from the organization, 2 facilitators, and participants. So the role of the facilitator is that they're also graduate students who are kind of just, as the name suggests, facilitating the conversation, making sure it stays on track, doesn't get derailed, making sure everyone is kind of participating and on board. And they actually play a really crucial role, because a lot of times the way these events will go will depend a lot on social dynamics and team dynamics, and the facilitators have a really important role in bridging the gap that can come between participants and org representatives, because again, nobody has ever met anyone, and so that's they play a pretty important role. So we have a selection process a few weeks before the event of actually recruiting facilitators and training them. And then the last component is mentors, our mentors. And so I'll talk about that more here. So who are the mentors and what is their role? So they're usually experts from the industry or in the field, data science practitioners, policy researchers, nonprofit consultants, and so on, that we recruit as mentors. And their job is to lend support to teams during the scoping process. It sounds similar to the role of facilitator, but they're sort of more removed and more high level. And they also come in and sort of lend support if they feel like teams are maybe going off track or are not really, making as much progress as they should be. This year we had a really good range of mentors. We had Matt Gee, who's co-founder and CEO of Bright Hive. We had Tom Schenk Jr., who is currently at KPMG, previously worked as Chief Data Officer for the City of Chicago. Nick Mayer, who is a senior researcher at Chapin Hall. Annie Bukes and Karen Dennis, who are both from the Mansueto Institute. And their role was to float around between all 6 teams and listen in on conversations and give help when and where they could. So our schedule of events is up on the website, so I won't go into too much detail about it, but I guess as a word to other groups, an event like this, there's a lot of iteration that goes on in what works and what doesn't. One of the things that we tried this year was, so the day looks like a half day on Friday and a full day on Saturday. And we tried to have all of the teams meet on day 1 itself And we found that worked really well because that way a lot of the initial awkwardness and introductions could kind of get gotten out of the way, so that Saturday people were like familiar with their team and ready to go, which we thought worked really well. But before that team breakout, which you can see happens at around 6:15, we had a keynote speaker. This year we had Kelly Dwyer, who founded Impact Academy, and she was a fantastic speaker. She really helped frame the weekend and talked about the intersection of data and social sector, and what to do and what to not do and what to think about. And then we had an introduction to the community partner representatives, which was also really great because it's easy in a thing like this to just think about your team and your team's problems, but everyone gave feedback that they really enjoyed being able to hear about the full range of organizations that we had. And then we had a networking reception, and that was the end of day one. And then day two is a much fuller day. It starts at 9:30, ended at 7:30. And basically, I won't go into too much detail about this, but we structured the day around a couple workshops and then a lot of team breakout sessions with lunch and coffee breaks and everything built in so that people are getting enough time to take a break from the scoping process, but also to network, because that is a big part of this. You can see, for example, at the lunchtime, we had a lot of organizations from around campus come and give presentations to the students and community organization representatives about what they're doing. And we found that that's a good way to connect people with resources on campus, because we do want relationships to continue past this two-day event, because obviously we're not here to try to solve all the problems in a span of 2 days. And same with the coffee break. And then all of this kind of goes into creating a final presentation, which everyone presents towards the end of the day. And then the mentors also serve as judges, and the judgment process is not to rank someone as like the best team or the worst team. It's more to see, okay, what did people accomplish? What was good? What could they improve on? And then we do a brief awards and thank you. So yeah, the beginning of the day starts with a scoping workshop. As I mentioned this year, we had Matt Gee. The purpose of this is really, taking the keynote speaker, which is more high level, and giving you a sort of sense of why we're here, why we're doing this, and really kind of walking people through the process of scoping and what it could look like, and what the purpose of it is, which questions they should be thinking about, what they should be getting out of the day. This year, Matt, he structured his presentation as a lot of failures that he has had and how those failures were due to a lack of scoping. He had some really scary numbers on the hundreds of millions of dollars cities have spent because they approached something as like a technical problem and they came to it with a technical solution instead of thinking about other factors, other contextual factors, and asking some really important questions before jumping into a solution. So he lays out like a more structured framework for thinking about this, which happens before the next team breakout. Beyond that, then, yeah, as I mentioned, we have several breakout sessions. Venue, again, plays a really big role here. We were really happy with our venue. We had lots of space and tables and whiteboards and things like that. We give people sort of a general sense of guiding questions for every breakout session. Okay, so this section you should be asking, questions about the data. What data do you have? What do you need to collect? What could be the problems with it? So we give them guidelines like that and sort of general milestones of, okay, by the second breakout, you should have defined your problem. By the third breakout, you should start working on your presentations. Other than that, we kind of leave it a little bit more open and allow the facilitators and mentors to see what pace each team is at. And yeah, as I mentioned, it's broken up by networking sessions and lunch coffee breaks. One thing that I'll mention is another new addition we had this year was we allowed the facilitators and mentors to break for lunch early and do a little mini check-in after the first breakout session, which was, I think, a really good idea because a lot of facilitators came to mentors with, our team is kind of going in this path and I don't know what to do with this. And it was a good check-in for the mentors to also be like, okay, these are the teams that maybe we need to go spend a bit more time with. Yeah, and then here's some more photos. and we'll go into final presentations, and Lauren's going to talk about them.
Great, thanks, Damini. Hi, I'm Lauren. As Alice mentioned, I am the co-director of community outreach, and so I'm just going to be talking a little bit more about how the rest of the day goes, how we wrap things up, kind of the main takeaways that the students, the organizations, and that also we as the board kind of took away from our event this year. So after the full day on Saturday, they have, multiple breakout sessions, networking sessions, and they're spending this whole day talking about the different problems that their organization came with, really trying to scope it to a specific problem definition, and then bringing out a fully scoped project plan that the organization can take away from the event. And so, but we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to actually learn about what everyone else has been working on. And we want to give the organizations a chance to also speak to what, their experience or also just the different types of projects or problems that were revealed over the weekend. And so we do this in the form of just presentations. So each team has about 10 minutes to present what they worked on. And we do this all over dinner. And so this year we had 6 organizations, so it normally takes about an hour, which we found is about the max amount of time that people will be willing to just sit there and listen to people present. But it's really important, I think, for people to be able to show what they worked on over the weekend. We have considered alternative methods like a poster walkthrough or, maybe just not having presentations, but we found that people really like being able to share what they worked on, and it's really great for us to come together at the end of the day and be like, wow, this is what we were able to accomplish. And so we have the mentors act as judges for these presentations, as Damini mentioned, and we'll have the mentors listen in on all the presentations. Everyone's allowed to ask a couple of questions, and then after the presentations, the mentors will kind of get together and talk about what each team did best and things that they could also improve on. So here you can just see a couple of pictures of just the different kind of parts of Scopeathon. You can see people presenting, you can see people, gesturing at whiteboards, which happens a lot during Scopeathon. People, listening to presentations, handing out awards, and and you can see actually our mentors in the top right, right before they gave out the awards. And so now, after the end of the day, everyone has their dinner, everyone's kind of saying goodbye, taking pictures together. And what we really wanted to talk about as well were takeaways. And so for students, I think we all kind of mentioned this in different ways as we've been talking, but it's just a really great way for students to have exposure to a real world problem in the community. Not only to engage more with the South Side of Chicago, which is not always something that's as available to them as students, but also to really think about the problems out there that their degree, especially in the MS-CAP program or the Harris School of Public Policy, we often think about how can data be used to further public sector goals, how can you use an evidence-based approach? And we actually hold Scopeathon at the beginning of the academic year. So it's the second week of our fall quarter. And so, students are just starting to get into their really theoretical economics and statistics courses. And this gives them a way to be like, okay, let me step back. That's really cool, but how can I actually think about how these skills will help me in real world problems? Or maybe even, as Damini mentioned, it's very common that an organization might come and they actually won't have, a real data science project yet. They need to collect data, or they need to put infrastructure in place to have data collection before they can actually make data science solutions. And it's important for students to not always jump to, oh, I can build that in R or Python, and not really think about what they're building. And of course, it is a great way for other people to connect. Because it's at the beginning of the school year, if people are new to the university, they can make new friends, but they can also learn more about the community itself, as well as some of the mentors being just really helpful in terms of networking opportunities. For the organizations, some of the takeaways that we've seen for them is, one, having that fully scoped project plan. It's in a deck already. That's something that people are very familiar with. It's something that's easy to go back to and well organized for them as they're thinking about how they want to implement. We also do connect them with a number of other University of Chicago resources and student organizations. So there are a lot of other organizations at the university that work with nonprofits, whether it be through consulting or other things like that. And so we bring as many of them in as we can during the lunch to actually present and meet with the organizations, but we also work behind the scenes after the event with the organizations, the community organizations, to see if they would like to be put in touch with any of the student organizations. And we also use our own network within the university to kind of see if there are any matches that can be made in order to possibly actually help implement the project that they came up with during the weekend. And so this is actually the full Scopeathon planning committee. It wasn't just the 5 of us. We also had a number of other people that were crucial in helping us set up the event, communicate with different partners and organizations. And so for us, it was something that we've been working on since, I'd say, last spring, last winter. And so it's just a really flagship event for us, and we put a lot of work into it. And so it's been a really great experience for all of us. The last thing I wanted to touch on were just some of the lessons we learned. I think this is also something we kind of have been sprinkling in across the board, but there are a lot of different things that we learned. One, because we were actually attendees of this event when we were first coming into the school, and so we first saw it as participants, and then we got to come in and change it as we thought was best as board members. And so the main thing that we realized is, this is a really special event. It's something that we find a lot of students have interest in, a lot of organizations also have interest in, and it can be really difficult to decide how you want to scale your event. So do you want to have as many people as possible because there is an advantage and a benefit to having it be as big as possible, to have as many people be able to attend as possible, but that also, requires finding the right venue space, if there is one that is large enough, and also coordinating to be able to find space, because, even we kept the event much smaller this year due to the fact that we wanted to have it be more intimate and have it be a little closer, but we still had people saying that it was too loud in the room that they were in, even though we only had 3 groups per room. And so, I think that in general, the groups need to be small and the overall event needs to be small as well. Another balance that's really important to strike over the course of the event is the balance of, workshops, speakers, and group work. So, I think sometimes when you have events like this, you're like, oh, we should have speakers all the time because people want to learn more about these different things. But then you kind of look at the schedule and you realize, oh, well, there's actually only about 5 hours for the group to actually sit down and work on this project that they're supposed to have fully scoped by the end of the day. And so it's definitely an iterative process. We changed it from last year, I'm sure, based on their experiences. The next board is also possibly going to change it. But it definitely just depends year by year on whether or not, there needs to be a couple more networking sessions or a couple more coffee breaks, or maybe just another keynote speaker if people think that would be more helpful for the experience. So Damini mentioned this as well, but a big lesson I think that was for the students definitely, and possibly for the organizations too, is that the solution doesn't always have to have a tech component. I actually had someone come up to me this year saying, like, I'm a little worried because, this organization came in wanting a tech solution, but I don't think they're ready for that yet. And I told them, I was like, that's actually an amazing realization to know that, like, without coming here, maybe they would have pursued that tech solution without actually having really thought it through. Then it wouldn't work. They would have kind of spent a lot of time or money on something that wasn't necessarily what they were looking for. And so instead, you can start from the beginning, help them figure out exactly what they're looking for, and build a plan to get there. So that's something that I truly love. And, organizations come in, I obviously speak to them from the very beginning about their different problems, kind of thinking about what might make sense for them to bring to Scopeathon. And so often they'll leave with a totally different kind of idea of what they want to do. And I just think that's so special because, it's just so easy to get really set in the way that you want to approach something or thinking about something, and to have different perspectives and have a space where you can really just focus on what you're trying to do and define that problem and scope it out is really special. Another thing that was important was just the following up post-event. So we have a survey that goes out to student participants, organizations, mentors, judges, speakers, to just get a sense of how they thought the event went. And particularly for organizations, we talked to them about if they would like us to help them match with different university resources. So we have had a couple of organizations say that they would like that, and I've been in touch with different student organizations to help them see if there are ways that they can work together to implement their Scopeathon project. And the last thing that we thought was really, really helpful this year was this increased facilitator and mentor interaction that Damini mentioned. So, you know, a lot of times, as I mentioned, because your problem shifts, you know, people can go off on tangents, or they get a little, maybe they're like, I'm not really sure where this is supposed to go anymore because we've kind of like gone off what we originally thought we were going to do. But these mentors who are experienced and have been doing this for a long time are super helpful and kind of bringing them back or giving them advice or even stepping in for a little bit to help get them back on track. And so making sure that facilitators knew that they had mentors available to them, had a designated time to actually speak to them and tell them, you know, like kind of share, like, even we actually had an open forum of all the facilitators and mentors. And it was just like, how's it going? Like, is it difficult? Are you running into problems? Let's kind of share it all together, see if we're having any common issues, if a particular issue is very specific to one group, then that meant a mentor might go and actually talk to those particular facilitators about that problem. And we found that actually helped keep the progress of the event a lot smoother, because there really isn't that much time to work. And so we want to make sure that people are staying on track as much as they can. So those were the main lessons that we learned. And I guess I'll just leave it open for questions now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was so interesting. It's really a pleasure to listen to you. Very unusual type of Scopeathon, I guess. Yeah, unusual type of event when you compare to hackathons that we've heard a lot in this program about hackathons, and it's the first time we hear about something so different like this. And I particularly appreciate how you highlight that it's not necessarily tech-oriented, and the answers are not necessarily tech-oriented, and how much space you leave to networking in the program. This is also something that I don't know that many hackathons necessarily do that. I have tons of questions actually, and I have them a little bit. I've written them a little bit in no order, so I'll just shoot a few of them like that. So have you actually, about this, like comparing with other events, have you found other organizations doing a similar type of things you're doing, or is it truly, you know, unique? It seems unique to me, but I was wondering whether you know of others.
I mean, I've never heard of any other organization doing like a pure Scopeathon. Have you guys?
I've seen a few, but mostly in like the non-tech sphere. Like, for example, ProPublica a few years ago did a design-a-thon kind of thing. And I think that's really the kind of sector where you can expect to see things like this in journalism, in nonprofits, and that kind of space. In the tech space, it tends to be really hackathon-oriented, product building. Yeah.
Right. Just a clarification, Lilian, you mentioned something about nonprofit. Are you a nonprofit organization, or do you have that status?
We work with them. We are a student group, so I don't know how you would class us exactly,
okay.
But our partners are mostly nonprofits, and we are affiliated with a university, so I guess that's the particular space we're in.
Yeah, and thank you for the detailed way you addressed funding. That's often a very important aspect of any student organization trying to do activities. So I know it's important, and it's great to hear, you know, what you consider that is a significant funding source for you, or in terms of amount, obviously. Actually, are those sponsors, I guess, do you get any support for your activities, or most of the support you get is for the event itself?
Well, the event is really, the Scopeathon is really our flagship event for the whole year, so most of our funding goes towards that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where the bulk of it goes. And we also found that it's kind of easier to give a pitch or value proposition when you're talking specifically about one event.
Got it. So is that why you are focusing particularly on organizing one big event in the year? Because you didn't mention any other potential well, you did mention, the whole follow-up and behind the scenes, of course, preparation, et cetera, et cetera. But you do not necessarily, you've not mentioned any like workshop or preparation event or other type of events during the year. So is that a...
Yeah, I can speak to that. So
Yeah.
I think for now, our main activity is Scopeathon. For us, we see Scopeathon as a pipeline to, an introduction to the different university resources once they have this kind of project plan in place. I think that, there have been conversations among us and with the incoming board about having particular workshops like for other, whether it be students or more organizations, just on scoping in general, maybe not having the full event, but just more about scoping and why it's important, because that is kind of like still something that I think continues to be a problem with data science projects. And so that's something that we've been considering, but for now, the main event is the Scopeathon. And then from there, we kind of work behind the scenes to connect different organizations with resources where we think it might be a good match.
But also one more thing to your point, with the funding constraints, so one of the ideas we floated last year was, at the end of Scopeathon, maybe like a prize could be that the one organization that has like a really scoped out plan, we give them like we sponsor a research assistant who's worked with them all year and like, make this come to fruition. But then when we factored into the cost of that, we were like, oh, that's a lot more money, right? Like that blows up your budget by fivefold. So these are ideas that we have like constantly thought about. And I think if and when we find the right partner, that's something that could happen. For now, yeah, we focus on the one event.
Very interesting. And so on the event itself, how do you select an organization, a partner who would, pitch
So
your challenge?
the process of deciding on which organizations kind of starts from we started in around June. So we open up the interest form in June. We leave it open for a couple months, just, summertime, people traveling, we want to keep it up. And we keep it pretty simple, just like, what does your organization do? What is the problem you're looking at? What kind of data do you have? And then from there, we'll get all of the responses. And this year we had a team of 4. So me, the other co-chair of community outreach, and then 2 other committee members. And we all went through, read the interest form, and we kind of highlighted ones that we thought could be a good match. We try to keep the organizations, across different sectors. We had one that was doing park advocacy this year, one that was looking at how to help businesses in the South Side grow, and different things like that. And so we try to, keep it pretty diverse, but we also are really looking for groups that seem to have a good sense of a problem that they're trying to solve, and that could be a good fit for Scopeathon. There are oftentimes, a lot of times people will just say, oh, I want to do like program evaluation. And that's not necessarily like the problem. That's not necessarily like a problem that you can like scope out really well. And so a lot of it is done through us kind of reading their interest forms. Then we'll reach out to them. We'll have a conversation with them, preferably over the phone, to really talk through like, this is what the event is. There's not going to be any coding. You're not going to have a web app at the end of the day. This is what we're trying to do. These are the resources that you'll be exposed to. And we make sure that, or we try to make sure that their expectations are as set as possible. And then once that has been done, it's been confirmed that they have a solid problem, that they are ready for the weekend and they're committed to the weekend, then we'll proceed forward. So it's definitely a process. I think this year, each of us were handling about 2 different organizations and communicating with them and kind of seeing what was a good fit. And then we ended up with 6 this year.
Okay, right, because they stay over the weekend, right? They are there during the conversation.
Yeah, and it is it's a big commitment. I think, I do think that, as we mentioned, there are definitely a number of takeaways that everyone gets out of the event, but it does require a level of commitment, and we want to make sure that both students and organizations who are coming are ready for that and are, excited for that and have a problem that they really want to solve.
And do you get some feedback from these organizations? I mean, you mentioned the evaluation forum, and so what sort of feedback do you get?
Yeah, we've been getting really great feedback. Actually, we got feedback from all of our organizations, just generally saying that it was a really great way for them to be exposed to the idea of problem definition and thinking about the different problems. And they also said that they really enjoyed being able to be connected to the university resources, because I do think a lot of them, just as we kind of see ourselves as a pipeline to the university, they also see it as that. And I know that just from my own experience that we've already had a couple of different organizations being matched with other student orgs as well. Actually, another thing I do remember, one team did say that they wanted to have like more networking opportunities. So that is kind of speaking to what we talked about, like that balance of work time, networking time, speaker time. And so, you know, I think I really like that. I love that. I actually saw a lot of groups were asking you to like take their photo at the end of the day. And I just love that they have that kind of bond even after only a day and a half. But as so far, we've had really good feedback this year.
Very good. Fantastic. Do you, I'm going through my list right now. Yeah, when there is a problem with data, have you encountered specific problems? I guess maybe the privacy concerns may have been raised depending on the type of data sets you guys get, but could you just touch a little bit more to these aspects of how you handle data sets for the competition?
Yeah, so we don't actually, since we're mostly focusing on problem definition, we don't actually have anyone like touch a data set. There are definitely groups that come in with a data set in mind, possibly even bring it like on their computer, or they say like part of the problem definition is that we want to focus on how we can make this data more secure, or how we can make sure that there are privacy settings and privacy controls for the data that we have. And that kind of goes into the project plan.
All right. Okay. Very interesting. Okay. So you don't even touch the data during the sessions.
Yeah. You might look at it if they have it and it's really relevant to your problem definition. But yeah, I think it's like, it is kind of that, I kind of like that, how it's like, oh, you don't do any coding. And I think that it's like really important, at least in my experience, to really step back and be like, what are we doing? And then from there, they can go back to their data. We have had groups, I know like one group came this year and they already had their data set. And so I think that the group kind of looked at it and then realized like, oh, you can't do what you want with this data. You're going to need more. And that was kind of part of their problem definition. But yeah, in terms of like actual data privacy or working with data, that's something that would go into like plans for that would go into the project plan. But I don't think that during the actual day that they would be hands-on dealing with it.
And I also think that by not having any emphasis on coding and explicitly not having that, it also allows us to like recruit students that from a slightly more varied background. Because like we mentioned, a lot of the participants who come, they've just started the school year, it's 2 weeks in. So for the participants in our program, they might have some of these skills in a few more months. Many of them don't right at that point. And we also don't want to just restrict it to participants from our program. So we want to have, you know, people from the Booth School, people from other programs in Harris School, but people from like the undergrad. And by having the no programming necessary disclaimer really clearly, I think it allows us to recruit a little bit more diverse as well.
Right, and you've mentioned having trouble to accommodate everyone. Did you, can you just give a sense, you might have done that already, but I might have missed, how many people joined the event?
Yeah, the whole event was on the order of like 90 to 100 people. Okay. But the breakdown of that is about 40 participants, about 12 to 15 facilitators, 5 plus mentors, speakers, all of that, and then 15 to 20 community org representatives. And I don't know what number I'm at right now, but also, and then also like the Southside Civic board and staff being another 5 to 10. So I think that adds up to between 90 and 100.
Very good. And do you have, so can you share on examples of organizations that have asked you, that have participated in the event? Just if a few come to your mind, otherwise.
Yeah, so we had one that was an organization that was working to provide like female athlete mentoring to different members of the community. We had one that was, so close to University of Chicago, there's Jackson Park, and that's actually where the Obama Presidential Library is going to be built. And so they had a lot of questions about like how can we kind of use this as a catalyst to increase recruitment, or sorry, increase engagement in the park among the youth? How can we use data to do that with our volunteer engagements? And so that was kind of another group that we had. Another one was focused more on like providing services to new businesses in the South Side to help them grow. That was just like a new startup nonprofit. And then yeah, we also had another one that was actually based a little bit further out of the South Side of Chicago, but we wanted to welcome different communities in the area, and they were kind of looking at different like immigrant and racial justice issues in their community, and they had some like traffic stop data as well.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a really wide range of groups that come, and I think that really helps in terms of, you know, why it's so important for everyone to hear about each group that's there and everyone to hear all of the presentations, because what I worked on is probably totally different from what the person in the group next to me worked on.
Absolutely. So if an organization watches this webinar and wants to get in touch with you, they should reach out to the email address that is right there.
Yes.
And do you, is like belonging, or is having a relationship with the South Side of Chicago or sort of criteria to select those organizations you want to work with, or not necessarily?
So historically, we have normally had it be around the University of Chicago, South Side of Chicago, but we have been trying to kind of open that up, because there are organizations that we've, you know, been talking to that are interested that are not necessarily located in the South Side. And so yeah, like South Side Civic, you know, was the original name, and we've kept it in honor of our predecessors, but we do open the event to organizations that are outside of the South Side of Chicago.
Okay, and I'm gonna stop asking all these questions, but it's very interesting. So my last question is more about you as a group, functioning as a group. Do you have a lot of turnover among the organizing team? I know that is one of the sort of challenges that other groups have encountered in just dealing with this, you know, yearly turnover and taking over the activities from the past year and building on the experience.
Yeah, so we do, because we're all in a 2-year program, it is kind of that annual turnover, but that's actually why we really like having it at the beginning of the year. So what happens is we have the event at the beginning of the year. By like January, we've selected our new board, the people who are going to basically replace us, which means that the old board have an overlap of roughly 6 months. When they start to ramp up and start planning and start getting their bearings of what's going on, we're still there to, you know, give feedback, give advice, give whatever. And so they'll start their planning somewhere in January, February, really ramp it up in the spring, which is for us like March to June. Then the summer will be a period where different things ramp up at different times, right? So like community outreach, for example, ramps up a lot in the summer. Partnerships, fundraising ramps up in the spring. And then a lot of like the logistics and marketing and communications and student recruitment ramps up in like the 3 or 4 weeks before the event itself. So all of this kind of builds up from February to October, and then the new board comes in after that. So far the structure has worked pretty well for us because it does allow for enough overlap. But yeah, and we do the best we can to transfer institutional knowledge. But there's always some learnings that each new board has.
Very interesting. Very, very good timing, and it seems to be working well for you. Very interesting. So I'll just finish up maybe with one last question. What recommendations would you give to a group of students who'd like to maybe do the same at their own institution, and where should they start? I know that's the tricky question that I kept for the end.
I guess we can all give maybe one thing. Yeah. I'm sure we won't cover everything, but I think if they're just starting from scratch, I would say find like the people who, you know, in positions of power who can really be an advocate. So whether that's for us and for our organization's history, those were like the faculty administrators for the MSCAP program. They're deeply passionate about this kind of work, and we're very, very supportive. They continue to advocate for us. They continue to help advertise for us. We had one of them come give like a speech this year. So finding the right sort of faculty or admin connection is going to be huge, because that also helps connect you to funding, that helps you connect to just figuring out what you're doing and how you're going to do it. And a lot of things that students who are on a 2-year cycle would struggle to figure out if they didn't have access to that. So yeah, find the right faculty person. One piece of advice.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, sure. So I would say I'll kind of come at it from like a higher level perspective. Like if it's something that a student group is interested in, I think the first kind of question is like, what kind of problems do you want to be focusing on? Like we took a really specific stance being like, we want to focus on social impact problems. I think scoping is pretty applicable to every type of problem. And so I could easily see this event becoming much broader in terms of the focus. Like maybe some are business problems, some are social impact problems, but I think like that is an important thing to decide, because that'll kind of direct like how the event might actually go and the different types of people that you would be looking to bring in. And I think might possibly all kind of come at this from like the particular part of the board that we are on. And so that's kind of why I'm thinking like community orgs, like, is that something that you would want? And because it is difficult, like, you know, if someone had just moved here from somewhere else to Chicago, the South Side, being like, oh, well, I don't know, like, how would I get in touch with these nonprofits? I don't even know how I would talk to them. And one is having that faculty sponsorship who can direct you to like, this center on campus can help connect you with different people. Like we had a lot of partners. I should have mentioned this actually when you asked. We had a lot of different university partners that were putting the Scopeathon interest form and like a little blurb about Scopeathon in their like newsletters, to be like, so the people who are reading them would be like, oh, I want to apply. And that was how we actually got a lot of the interest. But yeah, I would think like, not only do you want to have a really important sponsor, because I think that is very key, you also kind of want to know like what areas and are we really trying to focus on, and do we have connections there that we can actually bring them into this event? Because I think, as we mentioned before, you know, like the commitment that you need from the students. I think students isn't really the hard part. We often have a lot of student interest. What can be difficult is finding the right fit for organizations that are willing to come and spend that time for the weekend.
Yeah, and I think what I would say is to not be afraid to keep the event small, because I feel like sometimes with student groups, you're like, I want to do everything. I want to have 200 people at this event and just make it a really big deal. But we found that it can really be nicer to have like a smaller event where you're focusing less on juggling logistics, and you can focus more on creating a good participant experience for everyone involved, the intangibles, things like that. And I think we stepped back, we scaled it down a bit from last year, and that actually let us focus more on things like making sure that we recruited fewer community organizations, but we were able to make sure that the mix of teams was better, that logistics just flowed smoother, that it was a more intimate and more rewarding experience all around, I think. So just again, to not feel like you have to go big, especially if it's your first year doing something like this. You can start small and build it up from there if you want to. So yeah, just not being too ambitious right from the start, I guess.
Okay, yeah. And to Lauren's point, if you know, it's relevant for you to promote your event through the Midwest Big Data Hub, we're really happy to do that.
Oh, thank you.
Cool. Yay.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you so much. I've kept you a long time actually with all these questions, but it was really fascinating to see what you do. So congratulations on your work. This is really great. Keep doing that, and thank you again for presenting tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks.